Okay, so we're diving into some fascinating stuff today. Marian apparitions at Heroldsbach.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild case.
We've got eyewitness accounts and historical analysis, even theological debates. It's really quite the mix.
Definitely.
So, to set the stage, we're talking about post-World War II Germany.
Right.
A small Bavarian village called Heroldsbach,
Mm-hmm.
and 4 young girls who claim to have seen the Virgin Mary. Now, for devout Catholics like yourself, this is probably hitting close to home, huh?
It's definitely a topic that, sparks a lot of discussion and debate within the church.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The church's response to Marian apparitions is always, well, how do I put it?
Delicate.
Yes, delicate.
Yeah.
But in this case, it seems particularly complex.
Yes, you could say that.
So let's rewind the clock back to 1949.
Okay.
Just a few years after the end of World War II.
Germany is in ruins. I mean, physically, spiritually, people are really searching for something, anything to cling to.
Hope, meaning anything. It's a time of immense uncertainty and upheaval. And then, in the midst of all of this, you have these 4 young girls. Kuni Schleicher, Greta Google, Erica Miller, and Marie Heilmann, just ordinary children gathering leaves in the forest.
Right.
And then, bam, they have this extraordinary experience.
I mean, talk about a life-changing moment.
According to the sources, they first see the inscription IHS, the traditional symbol for Jesus.
Above a birch grove, no less. Like a signpost, pointing towards something sacred.
And then the big one, the vision of the woman in white, who the girls identify as the Virgin Mary.
It's described as almost ethereal, like a statue coming to life. Really quite something.
And her message, short, simple, but incredibly powerful, especially given the context.
People should be praying intensely.
A call to prayer, to repentance.
A reminder of the importance of faith in those troubled times.
And it resonates deeply with the anxieties of the time, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. The world is on edge. Another war could break out at any moment. And here is the Virgin Mary herself appearing to these young girls, urging them to pray.
And pray they do. And word spreads like wildfire. People flock to Heroldsbach by the thousands, seeking solace, hope, a sign from heaven.
It becomes a phenomenon.
It really does. And the apparitions themselves, well, they just get more and more elaborate.
We're talking life-size appearances, physical interactions with Mary, visions of the Holy Trinity, angels, even numerous saints.
Some of them, according to the sources, are pretty obscure.
Which is interesting, right? Makes you wonder about their specific significance. Why those particular saints?
Like a hidden code, just waiting to be deciphered.
Exactly.
And then there's the sun miracle of December 8, 1949.
The sources describe the sun changing colors, spinning, almost dancing in the sky.
Thousands witness this, including skeptics. It really throws fuel on the fire.
No doubt about it. But as the crowds grow and the apparitions intensify, the church starts to take notice. And not necessarily in a good way,
Things get complicated.
to say the least.
The Archdiocese of Bamberg forms a commission to investigate. But they're very cautious, wouldn't you say?
Well, the church has always been incredibly careful about endorsing claims of supernatural phenomena.
Right. They want to make absolutely sure that it's a genuine message from God and not some, overactive imagination or a hoax.
Yeah. I mean, imagine the chaos that could ensue if they just endorsed every claim that came their way. Mass hysteria, false hope, even heresy.
For those who genuinely believed in these apparitions, it must have been incredibly difficult to be told they were wrong.
I mean, can you imagine? You've seen these things, you feel this profound connection to the divine, and then the church tells you it's all in your head.
It creates a real tension between personal experience and official church teaching, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And in the case of Heroldsbach, that tension only grows as the story unfolds.
It's fascinating how the church tries to navigate this.
It's a tightrope walk for sure.
And we'll dive into how they handle it and the consequences that follow in the next part of our deep dive.
It's a story you won't want to miss.
So the church is in this really tough spot, right? Thousands claiming to see miracles, kids sharing these powerful messages, and the whole world's watching. What do they do?
Well, they try to kind of get a grip on things. The Archdiocese of Bamberg, they start issuing these decrees,
Oh, really?
discouraging pilgrimages to Heroldsbach, telling priests to stay away from anything to do with the apparitions.
Wow, that's pretty heavy-handed, isn't it? It's like they're trying to squash the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the church has a lot to think about.
Sure.
They can't just endorse anything that seems supernatural, can they?
It could get out of hand, right?
Exactly. Mass hysteria, false hopes, maybe even stuff that goes against church teaching, straight up heresy.
Yeah, I see how it can turn into a mess. But imagine you're one of those people who truly believe.
Oh, man.
You've seen these things, you think it's a real message from God.
And then the church tells you, nope, you're wrong. It's got to be rough.
It really highlights that clash between, like, personal experience and what the church says, right?
Totally. For those believers, those apparitions were like a lifeline, a source of comfort, guidance, in a world that felt like it was falling apart.
To have that just dismissed.
Must have been really tough.
And it wasn't just the pilgrims who got caught in the crosshairs.
Right.
What about Father Johannes Gaylor, the local priest? He was backing the kids at first, wasn't he?
Yeah, in the beginning he was, but as the church dug in its heels, he got stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Oh man, I bet. Torn between his faith, his duty to his parishioners, and, well, obeying the church.
It's a classic dilemma, isn't it? Obedience versus conscience.
And he chose the kids.
He did. Even with the archdiocese breathing down his neck, he kept supporting them.
So what happened?
Well, the church wasn't messing around. Despite his, years of service, his good reputation,
They kicked him out?
basically, removed him from his parish, silenced him. A huge blow, not just for him personally, but for the whole community who loved him.
It really shows you that even within the church, there can be these huge disagreements, leading to real pain, real division.
And it didn't stop there. As the apparitions went on and the girls refused to back down, the church took the ultimate step, excommunication.
Whoa. I mean, for devout Catholics, that's like the nuclear option.
It is. Cut off from the sacraments, the community. It's like being banished from the church entirely.
For these girls who were, like, deeply religious, thought they were doing what Mary wanted.
It must have been devastating. But even with that rejection, they didn't waver. Their faith stayed strong.
It's almost like those apparitions became even more defiant.
Right.
There are stories of Mary appearing to them in the parish church even after they were banned from the original site.
Like she was saying, you can't silence this. It's pretty powerful imagery.
It really is. It speaks to how deeply these girls believed. They weren't after fame or attention. They truly thought they were talking to the Mother of God.
And that faith, even in the face of all that opposition, it's pretty remarkable.
It makes you think about the nature of faith itself, right?
Yeah.
How it can clash with authority, even within the church.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, even with the excommunications, even with the church saying, this isn't real, people kept coming to Heroldsbach. Why? What kept drawing them in?
Well, for many, the experiences of the girls, the witnesses, it was just too powerful to ignore.
Right. They'd seen the sun miracle, heard the testimonies. It was more than just a story.
It was a real, visceral, spiritual experience for them.
And don't forget, the world was a scary place back then. Just out of a war, Cold War tensions rising, the threat of nuclear war hanging over everyone's heads. People were desperate for hope, for something to hold on to.
Absolutely. And the messages of Heroldsbach, the prayer, the repentance, the call to turn back to God.
It was exactly what they needed to hear.
It was, and for some, the church's opposition only made it seem more authentic, more powerful.
Like, if the church is trying this hard to shut it down, there must be something to it.
Exactly. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The more they pushed back, the more it spread.
So it backfired.
Big time. And through it all, the girls kept having their visions, kept sharing their messages. They never gave up.
And there were other weird things going on, right? Didn't some priest do his own investigation?
Yeah, there were rumors. This priest, no one knows who he was, he had all these religious relics.
Relics?
Yeah, like objects associated with saints and stuff.
Okay.
He'd show them to the girls without saying what they were, see if they could identify them. They did. Not just that, they'd give specific details, stuff they couldn't have known.
Whoa, that's spooky. It makes it all even more mysterious. But what about the messages themselves? So we talked about war and famine, but what else were they saying?
Well, a lot of it was about, traditional Catholic values, chastity, purity, obedience to the church.
Classic stuff.
Yeah. But also the importance of family, living simply, putting God first.
Sounds like a message of hope, but also a challenge, right? A call to get back to basics.
Definitely. And in the middle of all this drama, all this conflict, there's this really sweet story about Mary teaching the girls a song.
Oh. Tell me about that.
It was this simple melody, but the lyrics were all about love for Jesus. The girls would sing it during the apparitions. It became a source of comfort, especially when things were really tough.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Even in all that turmoil, faith can still bring peace. But what happened in the end? Did the church ever come around? And what about those girls?
Well, the Heroldsbach saga doesn't end with the excommunications. It actually takes some pretty surprising twists and turns.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. So even though the church tried to shut it all down, the story just wouldn't die.
Not a chance. And the next chapter of the story, it's a real roller coaster of faith, perseverance, and eventually a kind of coming together.
So the church is trying to put the brakes on Heroldsbach, but it's almost like the more they push back, the more it grows.
Yeah, it's like a what do you call it, a Streisand effect kind of thing.
Exactly. You try to suppress something, and it just blows up even bigger. So what happens? Do those apparitions just keep going forever?
Well, no, actually. They stop in 52.
Really? Just like that?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The story goes that Mary appears to the girls one last time, October 31st, 1952.
Halloween. Spooky.
Right. And she leaves them with this message. Victory will be ours. Then, poof, gone.
Victory will be ours. What do you think she meant by that?
It's a real head-scratcher. Some folks think it's about, good conquering evil, faith winning out over doubt.
Right.
Others say it's more personal, like a victory for the girls themselves who stuck to their guns even when the church was against them.
It's a pretty powerful way to go out, that's for sure. But what about the girls? What happened to them after all of this?
They lived pretty quiet lives, from what I gather. Stayed devout Catholics. Never said the apparitions weren't real, but they didn't go around shouting about it either. It's like they accepted the church's authority, but still, deep down, they believed.
That's got to be tough. To reconcile that personal faith with what the church is saying, especially after being excommunicated.
Yeah, it shows real strength of character, I think. And then, get this. Decades later, something really unexpected happens.
Okay, this is where it gets good. You said something about a reconciliation earlier.
Well, the church never actually said, okay, those apparitions were real. But in 1998, they lifted the excommunications on those 4 women.
Wow, after all that time. That's a huge deal. What made them change their minds?
No one really knows for sure. The church, they don't always explain their reasoning,
Fair enough.
But some people see it as a kind of quiet admission. Like, maybe they were too hard on those girls.
Yeah, like, okay, maybe they weren't lying. Maybe something happened there, even if we don't fully understand it.
Right. It's not an endorsement of the apparitions, but it's like acknowledging that those women, who were just kids back then, they really believed in what they saw and heard.
It's a subtle but important distinction, I think.
And you know what else? That same year, the Archdiocese, they said it was okay to have a place of prayer at Heroldsbach.
So not a full-blown shrine or anything?
No, but a spot where people could go to pray. Think about what happened there.
It's like they're saying, we're not saying it was real, but if you find comfort here, go for it.
Yeah, it's a way to respect people's faith, their experiences, even if it doesn't fit neatly into official doctrine.
That's a good point. It's a reminder that faith, it's not about having all the answers. It's about searching for truth, even when things are messy, when things don't make sense.
Exactly. And the story of Heroldsbach, it's full of those messy, confusing moments, but it also shows us how powerful faith can be, how it can survive doubt, rejection, even opposition from the church itself.
It's a story that really gets you thinking, about what it means to believe, about the relationship between personal experience and religious authority.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. Heroldsbach, it's still controversial, it's still a mystery, but it forces us to ask those big questions about faith, about truth, about how we make sense of the world around us.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What was the point of those apparitions? A real message from heaven, or just a collective hallucination?
Maybe we'll never know for sure, but what we do know is that it had a profound impact on so many lives. And it keeps people talking, keeps them searching, even all these years later. And that's pretty incredible when you think about it.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Thanks for walking us through this incredible story.
My pleasure. It's always fun to dive into these mysteries with you.
Until next time, folks, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep the faith.